Now that we get into chapter 3, we're going to focus on application rather than definitions and fundamentals of cost accounting. So in chapter 3, you'll notice there's a lot less definitions that you really need to know and a lot more equations. In this chapter, we talk about cost, volume, profit, which really focuses on break even and how much do we need to sell to reach a certain profit. So some of the equations that I want to go over with you, because I know we're going to need them. The first one is looking at that profit equation. So there's multiple ways to look at this, but you can always come back to this one equation where profit is going to equal your selling price minus your variable cost. We're going to multiply that by how many items we sell and subtract our fixed cost. Now, some things that we can break down this equation so that you know, at break even, profit is 0. So remember that when we start to work on some of these equations. Some other things we need to remember is contribution margin is equal to that selling price minus variable costs. That's going to be helpful and save you a lot of time if you can remember that. And there's a lot of ways you can kind of shortcut some of these equations. One of those is to find the break-even in units. Again, you can always come back to this equation here if you don't want to remember them all. But to shortcut and save yourself some time, if I do some simple algebra and I know that break-even is 0, I can come down to knowing the fact that to break even I need to cover my fixed costs. So I would take my fixed costs and divide that by my contribution margin per unit. Because remember, price minus variable cost equals contribution margin. Some other things that we want to consider is most likely we don't want to break even. We want to make some money. So we're going to use these same equations, but we're going to add to our fixed costs. And again, you can look at this as by putting a number into this profit piece here, or you can just add that to your fixed cost. And since we want it in units, we're going to divide by units. So I would say this is my fixed cost plus whatever profit I want to earn. And I'm going to divide that by my contribution margin per unit. And again, you're going to need all of these equations. I'm just going to go through a couple of equations here that are a little bit different than that you're going to need, and maybe I'm going to shortcut a little bit more than what the book's giving you. The other equation that's new and we're going to need to know is this after-tax profit, because we're going to start taking into considerations we're going to have to pay tax on our income. So we need to know what kind of income do we need to make to earn a certain profit after tax. So to get that income after tax, you're going to take your profit and you're going to divide this by 1 minus that tax rate. So hopefully those are helpful to you. One other thing we want to make sure we go over is this weighted average contribution margin. Because most companies sell more than one product, we want to make sure we get a weighted average contribution margin in order to realize what we need to break even. There's a couple steps to this process which we'll go through in the examples, but I want to give you a quick shortcut to find that weighted average contribution margin. So first we have to find, we have product A and product B. We're going to find our contribution margin for each product, and we're going to multiply that by our sales mix percentage, or how much of that product we sell. This is going to give us a contribution margin for each of those products. And and then what we're going to do is take those two contribution margins, add those together to equal that weighted average contribution margin. So let's show you how that works. We'll come down here, we'll go through a couple of different examples to show you a little piece of each of these homework problems. So this first example is coming from your book, exercise 3-43, and they're going to be giving you a lot of information. Again, a lot of this course is focused on analyzing the situation and not just being able to apply numbers to an equation. So we need to make sure we can find the information that we need. So we're going to go through and find that information that we need first. So Hammerhead Charters, they run a fishing trip. They charge $50 per trip. So right there, I know that this is my selling price. The variable costs are $20 per trip. And fixed costs, we're going to need that, $6,000 per trip. Then they also give me a tax rate. Need to know that as well, because we want to know first, how many trips must they sell to break even? Remember, breaking even is 0. So if I want to know trips, that's a per unit basis. So I would find first my contribution margin. And contribution margin is selling price minus variable cost. So my contribution margin is $30 per trip. So to find that break-even point, I'm going to take my fixed cost and divide by my contribution margin per unit. So my fixed costs are $6,000. My contribution margin per unit is 30, which means I would need to sell 200 trips to break even. Now let's take this one step further. And it says I want to not only break even, I want to have an operating profit of $9,000 after taxes. So let me go ahead and put this in a different color so you can see the difference. So if we want to earn $9,000 after taxes, the first thing I have to figure out is how much income is that before taxes. So to figure that out, I'm going to come up here and look at this equation, and I'm going to bring that down here and use that to find my income that I need to earn that certain amount of profit after taxes. So if my profit was $9,000 and I know my tax rate is 25%, I would know the income I would need is $12,000 to earn that $9,000 after taxes. So that $12,000 is what I'm going to use to find my break-even point with that target volume. So again, I can come up here and I want to know in units, how many do I have to sell? I use this equation. I'm going to bring it down and find out what do I need to sell if I want to earn that $9,000 after taxes. So to do that, I'm going to take my fixed costs plus that profit that I need, which is 12,000, and I'm going to divide that all by my contribution margin per unit, which is 30. If I do that math, it comes to 600 trips. So you can see a little bit of how we're trying to introduce a topic and then kind of make you think, okay, well, what are some of the other implications to this? So let's go over one more problem here. And this is going to take that again to the next level, because what if I sell two different products? Here I'm selling tacos. I sell chicken and fish tacos, and I need to know, what do I have to sell in order to break even? And taking a look at each of these items and what it's going to take. So that first one is asking us, what is the anticipated level of profits for the expected sales volume? So how much do I expect to sell as is with the information given? So based on the information given, I know the first thing I need to do to make this easier for chicken, I have a $3 sales price, $1.50 variable cost, which gives me that contribution margin of $1.50. For fish, I have a selling price of $4.50, variable cost of $2.25, which gives me that contribution margin of $2.25. I'm going to take this, multiply it by how many I expect to sell, because that's what your contribution margin does, is it tells you how much you're going to make per unit. And this is going to tell me that I add those up, and I don't have that number. All right, so let's look at what we need to do to find this expected sales volume. If I take my contribution margin times the number of units, I would get 300,000 here, and I would get 675,000 here. This is how much profit I would make just from selling those. But then I would have to take and subtract my fixed costs. My fixed costs are 117,000, which would give me a profit of 858,000. So that's what my expected sales are. But now let's look at how much I need to actually break even. The second problem here wants to compute the break-even volume. How many units do I have to sell? Based on a sales mix, that's telling me I expect to sell 40% chicken, 60% fish. And what's that going to do to my equations? So first, what I have to do is use these contribution margins. And I'm going to take those contribution margins and I'm going to find my weighted average contribution margin. So looking at chicken, looking at fish, I'm going to take these contribution margins, move them down here. Unfortunately, it's the same as the variable cost. So I want you to distinguish, I'm taking the contribution margin. I'm going to multiply that by my percentages that they tell me what my product mix would be. Once I multiply that, I get 0.60 here and $1.35 here. I'm going to add those together to get my weighted average contribution margin. So now I can use this weighted average contribution margin, and I can say my fixed costs were 117. My contribution margin per unit is $1.95, which means I need to sell 60,000 units to break even. But what I need to do now is break this into chicken and fish. If I take that 60,000 and I'm going to multiply this by my 40% for my sales mix here and 60% for my sales mix there. And that will tell me how many tacos I need to sell of each one. I need to sell 24,000 and 36,000 of chicken and fish. So here and here. So that's looking at it as they're giving me the percentages of each one. But now what if they tell me the same information, but they're giving me a little bit of different variety here? They're telling me if my product sales mix were to change to 4 chicken tacos for each fish taco, that means that I have a 4-to-1 ratio. And I'm going to use this then to find out my new break even. So let's come down here and look and see what that looks like. So, first of all, I have to find out what percentages I'm looking at. Out of 5 tacos, 4 of those are going to be chicken, which gives me an 80% profit mix. For fish, it's 1 taco, which gives me that 20%. And from here, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my chicken and fish. I'm going to take those contribution margins, which was $1.50 and $2.25, and I'm going to multiply those by my percentages. This will give me 1.2 and 0.45. I'll add those together for 1.65, and this is again my weighted average contribution margin. I take that weighted average contribution margin, I bring back in those fixed costs that I need to cover, divide by that weighted average contribution margin, and that will give me approximately $70,909. Then I'm just going to again break that back up between chicken and fish. And I'll take that 70,909, how many units I need to sell. And I'm just going to then again multiply it by how many, whatever that percentage was that I came up with, to figure out how many I need to sell of each unit, which is 56,727 and 14,182. So hopefully that helps and gets you started with this cost volume profit. There's a couple other things that are thrown into here. If you need help with any of the other concepts, let me know and I can go through those with you.